Hi, Kevin McDonald here and welcome to the Progressive Property Podcast, and I've got a really special episode today. So I'm joined by Simon Cooper, also known as Damp Sam. So if you're interested in property investing, looking to get started in property, or you're looking to build a property portfolio, scale your portfolio, you gotta listen to this episode, because one of the big problems we have in property can often be, especially in the UK, damp issues. Damp Sam is a damp expert, but he's not just that, he's also a property investor. He's been in property investing since around the 90s. So you're going to absolutely love this episode. So Simon, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me here.
No worries at all. Before we get started, the first question I've got to ask you is, Simon Cooper, why do they call you Damp Sam?
Right, so I'll give you a short version. So my cousin, back in when we were in junior school, he started calling me Simon, shortened it to Sam. And then when I started networking back in, I think it was back in 2000s, one of the lads who come with us, Henry, one of my mates, he come up and he said there were a guy called Tanking Tony. I think you might know him, Tanking Tony. I think he's been to your networking things from up in Sheffield.
Maybe.
Waterproofing guy, and he says that he's called Tanking Tony, and he just went Damp Sam, and I thought that's going to be a good hook for if I come down here networking. So Kellyanne got me to come down to Progressive to do the multiple streams.
Yeah. And
when I came down, I think there must have been about 200 people in the room upstairs in here, and when I got to sit on front because I had a
special
VIP
ticket.
VIP ticket, so I got to sit on front. And any time I could ask a question, I stuck my hand up. When they said to you, "What's your name?" because this is one of the things you do, I just come up with Damp Sam, and I thought it's a brand, people are going to remember it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I come up with Damp Sam. So and I've used it ever since. And then from using it down here, we started doing YouTube videos. So networking thing that I went to, they said you need to do, as part of social media, you need to do 5 videos about damp or about whatever your business you're in. 5 videos, upload them to YouTube. So I got my camera, and it was a shop that I were renovating at the time. It was a shop in Barnsley, a commercial. And I just thought, get out of my comfort zone, get my drill out, and I'll do one on damp proofing. So I just did some drill holes, set my camera up on my phone, did some drill holes, filmed it, and then I set my YouTube channel up, uploaded it. So I did 5 videos. I did one doing that, one cutting some membrane, a couple of other things. And I just left it. I carried on going at networking for around about a year. And then it got round to the time where they did another social media course. So I went on this social media course, and then they mentioned these videos that I'd totally forgot about. So I revisited them, had a look, and I'd got 60 views, which I thought, 60 people look at my videos, which that's good. But at that time, I'd seen that Safeguard had fetched a new system out, which is called an express damp proofing system. Now, old type of damp proofing, you'd got high pressure injection into the wall. You'd got wet plastering, which is sand and cement or lightweight plasters. But this system, it just used dry zone, which is injected into bricks, which you probably know about, and then it was a dry shield cream putting up wall, and then a plasterboard stuck to the wall. Cheapest system you can use. It costs naught to install, but you just need specialist knowledge to install it. So I thought, well, I'll do a video of me just fitting this system. So I set my camera up. It was in a terraced house in, I think it was Swinton. Set my camera up. And then I went to the camera and I'm like, I am Damp Sam. In fact, it's on my YouTube channel. It's first video that you see. And you'll see how kind of uncomfortable I am with camera. I am Damp Sam, blah, blah. And I filmed it, and then I put it up on YouTube, and I saw that, first of all, got about 60 views, and then I sort of left it for a week, 2 weeks, and then I got like something like it was going up to 800 views, and I thought, oh, for now, that's got a bit of traction. I've got 800 views. Left it a bit longer, and then it went into thousands, and it seems to get this traction, and then it kept having spikes, and that showed me that there is a digital economy.
Yeah.
So this was sort of 5 years ago, and at minute it's up to sort of 500,000 views at minute.
Do you want another spike?
Yeah.
What's your YouTube channel called?
If you search for Damp Sam on YouTube, it'll come up straight away, and I think it just says Damp Sam on it. So search for Damp Sam. There ain't many other people called Damp Sam. Then it'll just come up my face. And up to now, I've done about 500 videos.
But don't search for that till you finish listening to the podcast.
Yeah, listen to the podcast first. So now I'm up to sort of 500 videos, and I've just sort of done a JV with Progressive now, where we've set up a podcast and they're doing some repurposing. So as well as my sort of crude rubbish videos, now for my community, which has kind of grown to around about 5,000 or 6,000 people, we've got a more polished product. So all these that stuck with me and had my face on rubbish videos, now you get a better quality video. So that's idea. And as the years have gone on, as I've seen traction gaining, I can see that there's a lot of opportunity in digital world. So that's basically how I got my name, Damp Sam, and that's how I sort of flown with it.
Well, I'm going to come back to damp in a few minutes, because obviously in damp proofers, they're not easy to find. Good damp proofers aren't easy to find, and almost when you find one, knowing what type of damp proofing you should do is you kind of leave it up to the damp proofer to tell you. So I think it'll really help the audience if we talk through some of the different, you mentioned there are a few different ways to do damp proofing and what the good ways are. But I want to come back to that first of all, because you're also a property investor. Yep. So when did you start investing in property?
So my first property investment were in 1994.
Before I was born.
So back in 80s, if you live in Barnsley, you've probably seen it because obviously you're from around Sheffield, but you'll probably be aware of Barnsley's got a broadsheet. It's one of the only broadsheets in the country now. It comes out every Friday, and it's called Barnsley Chronicle. And Barnsley Chronicle used to have a property section on it, and every week I'd sort of read Chronicle when I was a young plasterer, and I'd get the property section, and it had page after page after page. Just each estate agent had their own page before social media. Obviously now you've got these sites, but you just read each one from each thing. So as I'm reading them, I was getting to know prices for all properties, every type of property. They had a little commercial section on back, and then because I was a plasterer, I was going all up and down the country, going in different people's houses, seeing these gorgeous houses and not so gorgeous ones. So in my mind, I got a picture of the type of property that I wanted to buy, which were a Victorian terrace with a cellar, attic, a front room, and a sort of dining room and a kitchen on back. And I wanted a garage and a garden. So I'd got this picture in my head, but I wanted it with original fittings in. And then I started looking around for property, and then this one come up on Park Road. Went into the bank, got a mortgage, and then we started renovating it. Renovated attic first. I knocked all walls out, got attic plastered out, and we moved into attic. The last I was seeing at time. And then I just renovated it a room at a time over a 5-year period. Yeah. Took me absolutely ages, but we did it to a really good standard. But it had every original feature in. It had marble fireplace in front room. It had one in dining room. Each bedroom's had them. It had oak cornices. Woman that had it before she'd not even got gas. So it was one of them. I mean, you'll have come across them properties where you find them and an old woman's had it. And
there's a lot of them in the north.
Yeah, and but it's got all original features. I mean, back then it was probably a bit easier than it is now because that's what everybody's looking for. So I did it up over
5 years.
Over 5 years. Took me up to about 1999, and then just as I'd bought it, I bought it for 30 grand, and when I come to sell it, it had doubled in value, so it'd gone to 60. I sold it for 60. Moved in with my sister.
What's it worth today?
It'd be worth around about 200,000.
Do you wish you kept it?
I wish I'd have kept it, and I wish I'd have converted basement, because this was before I started with all my damp work. One of the things as well with that property, I found out through, I don't know how I found out about this, but I got a whisper that you could get a grant to do things up, and we'd already started some at work. So this guy from council come and he had a look round and he says, oh, I can get you a grant for windows, I can get you a grant for electrics, and there was something else. So I ended up with a grant for about £4,900, which helped me no end, because I'd got nothing. You know what I mean? It was like we bought a house, and then I was just doing bits when I had a bit of spare money, and borrowing bags of plaster off of different sites that we were on, dragging them back. But yeah, so doubled in value, and then I was looking for a property then. So where I lived in Barnsley, well, Montbretton, I used to walk down Burton Road every day to go to town. When I started going out, so we moved in when I was in 70s, and then so every day, if I was going to town just shopping when I was a teenager, I'd walk down Burton Road, and there was this house, and it was between there was some terraced houses, and it was between two terraced houses, set back, what I call built into a hill. It's a villa built into a hill. It weren't really. It's a single-story bungalow. It had a flat roof, and it had one massive window in front. Awful, just an awful building. And I used to walk past, and what they used to do is they left the light on all night. So I'd walk to town when I started going out, come back, and I'd be like, 1 o'clock in the morning, they've got light on, curtains open, and they left light on all the time. And when I bought my house at Park Road, we always leave his light on, so burglars don't get in. I think that's what it is. Burglars think there's somebody in. But when I'd sold my house, looking around for different houses, and this property, you could just see the top of it, and there were all these trees all around it. It had a little white fence, but awful. So my sister says, "Why don't you go and look at that bungalow? It's been up for sale for 12 months." So I thought, I'll go on then, I'll have a look at it. Anyway, I went into estate agents, got a viewing, went up path. As soon as I went round back, it was just covered in trees, but there were just land to the side, land to other side. Gardens at back were just like something off a queue. They were all tiered, and old couple they'd made a great job. So I ended up buying that. So it were up for £60,000. Went in, offered 40. They said no. Went back with another offered 46. I got it for £46,000. So this property, got in, ripped roof off, and got it to live. So I put like an apex roof on, built an extension outside, and then moved in again. Did a bit at a time. Got bathroom in, and then kitchen. I was sleeping in a sleeping bag on site, and then I've done it up a bit at a time, bit at a time. What I did then, I got some fencing, and I got a garden plot to it right. I gave that to my mum and dad. They built an house there. On other side, as soon as I moved in, I bought some Harris fencing, and I fenced a big section off. So made my intentions clear. This is mine, even though it weren't. Fenced a big section off. at that time, I'd sent off for a little disc. Again, before social media, before files, a little CD come, and it were about possessory title.
Yeah.
So I read up on possessory title, you know, what's needed. First thing you have to do, fence it off.
Then take care of it.
One way, and then take care of it over 12 years. So anyway, 12 years later, applied to land registry, and it weren't an overnight thing. Took about a year and a half for it to come through. Land registry are just the slowest things that I've ever slowest company I've ever had to deal with. They just take forever. So so we got this land anyway, and then over coming years, applied for planning permission, got planning permission for a 4-bedroom property to build on it. I built this massive kitchen extension. So anybody that looks on my videos, you'll see that a lot of my videos is done from kitchen extension. It's 12 metres by 6 metres, just a kitchen. And we were going to build this property next door and move into it. But because we've got this kitchen extension, we've got like such a lovely view and sunsets behind trees. And if we build this house, we're going to be in shade. So what I did, we started the project, and I got a company. I'm just trying to think what they're called. Ellie. So Ellie McKay were on she were on a clubhouse, and I rang in or got to speak, and I was asking about it were getting up to 3-year period, and I says, how do I stop planning from lapsing on this? I said,
start the works.
So Ellie said, I'll direct message you. So she sent me details for some planning people in Birmingham, Marans I think they call them. I got in touch with them, and he sort of said, we're going to have to knock about here. I says, it was January, and it was lapsing in end of April. So then it cost me another 10 grand to satisfy planning conditions. But we got it through, dug a hole, took a picture, and now that can stay. When I'm dead and buried, my son, he'll sort of take it on, and if he wants to build an house, build an house. So if he wants to sell it, but we'll probably keep family home. So this house, what I bought for £46,000, it's the house that never stops giving. So it's like we've sort of got, well, my mum's house is in trust for me and my sister. So that were another thing that we did. So 7 years ago, I spoke to my parents and I said, look, what's happening is people with, elderly people, they're losing their houses that they've worked all their life for. What we need to do is put it in a trust. So a mate of mine had just done it, had just put his in a trust. So he gave me a number at solicitors. We went there. Well, it took me ages to get my dad to do it. My dad kept saying yeah, and then he kept saying no, having second thoughts. So I gave him all these, what they call it, these leaflets. He read up on it and he said, right, he says, that sounds okay. So we went in and did it. And some clauses that they put it, I don't know whether they call them clauses. They have to list why they want to put it in a trust. And one of them is, if my dad passes away, it's in case my mum gets married, I mean, she's like 80 odd. Yeah. But it happens.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
It happens, and people lose the properties because of it.
She could marry a 25-year-old.
Yeah.
It could happen.
Well, I had an auntie in South Africa. I don't know if I should say this. I had an auntie in South Africa.
Nobody's listening.
And
she would be like.
She was big into church, and that happened to her. So this lad had an interest in her. He were like in his 30s. I think she were in her 70s. But we couldn't tell her, you know what I mean, that it was because he were after your money. But anyway,
it happens.
Yeah, things came to an end, and that ended anyway. But yeah, so
trusts are definitely great, and if you are looking to protect your assets from inheritance tax, look into trusts for sure. Your first 2 property deals then, the first one was you moved into it, spent 5 years doing it up, and it was kind of your family home. You sold it on. Your next one, again, is still your family home, I guess. Now, for anyone who's starting out in property, do you think they should, I'm going to talk about investments and tenants and stuff as well. You've got some tenants and investment properties? Let's go there in a minute. But for anyone starting out in property, should they, with your background in construction and build works and damp proofing, etc., refurbishments, should somebody who's looking to get started in property do their own projects, do their own refurbs, or should they hire the professionals in?
It depends on how much renovations has got to be done. If you're knocking walls out and putting steels in, you need to get professionals in. But like some properties you can buy them and they might only need decorating. So if you're any good at decorating, then there's no reason why you can't just do them yourself. But every property is different. I think that's what I'm looking to say. Don't try doing damp proofing yourself. That's a specialist area, because not all damp is rising, and this is one of the things that I want to try and get through to people, because there's 5 or 6 different types of damp, and it needs to be diagnosed correctly, because a lot of companies, and I've seen reports from companies, because I do damp and timber surveys. I'm a qualified damp surveyor and waterproofing surveyor, and I get sent RIC surveys, and I get sent other damp companies surveys, and when I see that they've put it's got rising damp all the way through and it's got to be hacked off all the way through, bells start ringing in my head, because if they're saying that there's rising damp around your fireplace and it's been blocked up, then it won't be rising damp. It's probably sulfates and it's probably bridging. The
surveyors don't know, do they?
No.
They just make a comment on a report.
Yeah.
Now, just for anyone, so you mentioned rising damp there. For some people listening right now, maybe you're like me and you're thinking rising damp, that's a TV program from the 70s. So what is rising damp? What causes rising damp? And what other types of damp are there? So just give us a little bit of a simple terms, new person thinking about damp. How do we identify what different types of damp are? All yours.
So rising damp is basically ground, salts from ground that move up capillaries, and then the water evaporates out of the wall and leaves a salty deposit, and you normally see what's called a salt band. So these are properties that's probably not got a damp course in. What we look at is properties pre 1919 is classed as traditional. After 1919 is modern. Now, these properties before 1919 that's got damp courses in, and there's properties after that aren't. But I think it was SPAB or one of these ancient companies that sort of do, look after architecture and stuff like that. It was them that had to make a mark. So they always said 2019, so before that and after. But there's different types of damp cores. So you might have slate, they might have used slate, they might have just used they have like a ledge. I'm just trying to think how I'd explain that. It's not a ledge. It's where bottom brick sort of juts out. Anyway, so that's part of damp course as well. And and underneath you'd have like an engineering brick.
Yeah.
So it's a more dense brick. But water finds its easiest path. So groundwater will go up through less dense area. And they used to think it was bricks, and it's generally mortar. So it goes up through mortar course. So when you drill mortar course, if you're retrofitting a DPC, you'd drill into mortar course and stop the moisture's path. But your other types of damp, if you've got different ground levels, higher ground levels, lower ground levels inside a property, so you've got to step up into the kitchen, then you might have a concrete floor, and then you might have sort of, I don't know, about 150 mil, which is where you can get lateral damp. So damp is going to come horizontally, and that little area needs a waterproofing system. You've got sulfate salts, which is sulfate's a byproduct when fossil fuels were burnt in open fireplaces. So basically soot on inside a chimney. When that gets wet, that'll migrate to the surface, and you get like a yellow staining. And both types of salts are what's called hygroscopic. So once they're on the surface at plaster, they'll absorb moisture from the atmosphere and then show up even wetter. So it kind of compounds it. And just because you've got that, what you'd have to look at as well is if you've got adequate ventilation. So all properties should have a fan in kitchen and a fan in bathroom, and there should be low carbon continuously running ones, and that stops build up of humidity, and that stops it compounding on walls. So you've got all these different types of damp that need to be diagnosed separately, so that separate systems can be used to stop you getting issues in future.
What's the most difficult one to get rid of?
For me, none of them, because
I'm asking the expert. What's the most difficult one to get rid of?
There's differences.
What's the most expensive?
Probably waterproofing. So, but this is like a different area. So where I'm from, and which used to be your catchment area, we've got lots of properties that's built on hills. So there's a lot of cellars. Now, these cellars, if they were in London, Manchester, or any big cities, they'd be worth converting.
Yeah.
Where I'm from, it's not going to add any value to houses. So these are hard to do, because there's a document called BS 8102, and in that document it's a guide for how structures that's got our structures below ground should be waterproofed. And in this guide it tells you that it should have a drainage system. Now there's a lot of companies fitting waterproof systems, converting these small cellars, but they're not putting drainage in. So what they're doing is that it can only be used as a storage unit. So this is grey area. And I know it's like some people can only afford to have it without a drainage system, because that involves the sump pump channels, and then obviously concreting and stuff. But if they find someone who says, "Well, I'll do it for I'll do you a cellar for £5,000," and then they just put waterproofing membrane on wall and floor, and then they can use it as storage, you tend to find them sticking a bed in or a telly, and they use it. So, but your issue is going to be when water starts to come to bear on structure. It's going to come in at floor wall joint, and then when water comes in, it's whether they've understood, with the person that's fitted the system, have they understood that they haven't put a drainage system in, and as the company got them to sign that they've been told that if you don't put a drainage system in, you can only use it for storage. So that's one of the issues. So I'd say waterproofing is going to be most expensive, and it's not going to add much value in Barnsley yet. You know what I mean? As gentrification happens and Manchester gets more expensive, we're not far off there, so you never know.
That leads on to a question actually about costing up a refurb, because you touched on a really good point there. Is if you're in London and you do a basement conversion, and you could add like a basement flat or something, you're going to add massive value. You could title split it, you could sell it separately. Same in cities like Manchester. But if you go to Barnsley, and not just Barnsley, there's other towns available in the north as well. So anywhere sort of probably north of Nottingham, say, if you took a level across the country, the cost of doing a basement conversion or even a loft conversion, so it probably adds about the value to the property, or even you might even spend more on a basement conversion than it'll add. So how do you cost up if you're starting out in property, if somebody's listening to this now and they're thinking, I want to get into property, I'm going to take on a refurbishment project, what tips would you give them on sort of costing up a refurb and what's worth doing and what's not worth doing?
Well, when I get loads of inquiries for basements, and what I've got a responder what I send out. So and that explains to them how much per square metre it'd be for a basement and how much a drainage system would be. So I'll send that. We'll get inquiries. It saves me going out looking because basically they'll go down into the cellar and they'll go, it's a great room this. We'll ring somebody up and get somebody to come out and price it up. You know what I mean? Thinking that your time don't cost money. So one of the systems that I've got is we made this responder. When we get an inquiry, I'll send it out. 9 times out of 10, people don't ring back because to find out what it is. And on mine it says 1,500 per square metre of floor space. But then you have to measure height. Is it 2 metres? Because that's building regs. At bottom of stairs, is it 2 metres? If not, you might have to dig down. If you have to dig down, you might have to underpin it. Underpinning is £3,000 to £5,000 per metre. You might have to do that. Drainage system starting at sort of 5,000 or plus that. And when they look at these, 5x5 rooms, and it's going to cost them like £40,000 to be done correctly.
Yeah.
Now, like I was saying before, people will do it cheaper. There's always somebody going to do it cheaper.
That's the problem, is they look at the price of it, 40k, and then they go for the cheap option, and cheap means cheap, not valuable, and they end up having to do it again or not using it how they wanted to.
That's it.
But 40k or even more to do that in London will add significant value, but I guess 40k in north of sort of Nottingham, and it's not adding 40k. Well, so it's knowing where you are in the country.
Yeah, yesterday I was looking at I think it was on our Facebook. I'm on a Facebook group for on Wickham Hill's Facebook group for waterproofing, and they kind of put projects on that they've supplied materials to, and there were a vaulted ceiling that went under a pavement in London, and it weren't as big as a cupboard at my house. It was tiny. It was about as wide as that alcove, and then probably say 3 metres. And they'd waterproofed it by rendering it, and then they'd put a membrane system on it, and then they'd lattered it, and then they'd kind of had it all plastered. And it looked great when it was done, but amount of money that would have cost to have that done. Only in London will it add value to property. And like I said, they'll probably stick a bed in there and somebody will live in that. But so it all depends on where you are in country, to what your price is going to be.
So if you're in the south of England, certainly great opportunity to add value by doing basement conversions. If you're in the north, probably, and I've found this, I've got a lot of basements, I've never converted them because it's just not really worthwhile when you look at the costs. So in the north, probably not converting basements wise, but whether you be south or north and you're focused on just a normal house, the normal bedrooms, let me give you some examples and tell me what you think of these. I've been in some properties, many properties. Damp on the outside walls, you kind of inject the walls, I guess, and stop the damp. Let me give you some examples of stuff I've seen. So middle of the house, under the stair cupboard, the walls are wet, but there's no sign of any wet on the external walls. What's causing that?
Probably condensation. So if you've got a cupboard and it's a dead pocket of air, then if we went in, first thing I'd look at is there an extractor fan in kitchen? Is cooker hood venting externally? Upstairs, have they got one in bathroom? That's first thing I'd look at. If they have got one in bathroom, is it performing good? And one of the best things to do to see if your fan's performing, flick it on, get a £10 or £20 note, depending on how rich you are, stick it on thing and just see whether it sucks it and holds it on. If you don't hold it on, then your fan's not performing. But other thing, if you are having to switch it on with light, you're not going to have much ventilation, so you want to continuously running one over 24 hours. So these fans, when they're fitted, the low carbon, I had one fitted in my bathroom and I was reading paperwork on it, and and I couldn't believe how much it was to run. It was 49 pence for year.
For the year?
To run, yeah.
What type of fan's that?
Low carbon.
Low carbon fan?
Yeah, continuously running. And a lot of your cost is apparently when it switches it on and off.
And that's with the increased energy prices.
Yeah. So these fans continuously running. So what happens is they're just running. They're not going flat out. They're just really slowly running over 24 hours. And then when you do turn light on, it gives it a boost.
Right.
So while light's on, it's running quickly. And when you turn it off, it'll run for a bit, and then it'll just start on a trickle, what we call a trickle. So it's continually taking humid air out of the property. So if you've got to build up a humid air inside your property, and you've got an understairs cupboard, you've got cold walls, then you've not got much ventilation in there, so condensation will form, and because there's no ventilation running in and out, it's not going to evaporate that moisture on walls, and then you get black mould forming. You get this in kitchens, behind kitchen units. I mean, we get a lot of calls, and they'll say, my kitchen units, every time I open cupboards, they stink of mould, and straight away I'll go, it's because you've got lack of adequate ventilation, cold walls at back, there might be some damp at back as well, so condensation's forming, it's staying, and then black mould's formed. And so every time you open that, you've got that musty smell, and you can't get to treat that mould, so you can only say, well, you can add some ventilation now, so you can put some vents in kicker boards, so you could drill some holes and put some louvered vents on, just allow air to flow around it, and then make sure you get a decent ventilation in your kitchen as low carbon fan. And then when you change your kitchen, then in between, your old one going out, your new one coming in, then get a damp proofer in and get them to look at it. If it's dry and you've just got black mould on, just get it treated, and treat it with a product with benzalkonium in it. So have a look on back and look for benzalkonium. Don't treat it with out that's got sodium in it, because sodium's the salts. So when I was saying that you've got ground salts that leave a band on your wall, and then you've got sulfate salts that's on your chimney breast, they absorb moisture because they're hygroscopic. So if you've got a mould spray that's sodium based, once you spray it on, it'll get rid of it to start with, because it's bleach based, and bleach is sodium based as well. So once you spray it on, it's okay, it'll remove it to start with, but then once it's left, that means it's going to absorb moisture, and it's going to come back quicker.
Yeah.
So you need to use proper products, and then probably paint it with an anti-mold paint. So so there are a couple of tips for if you've got smelling cupboards in your kitchen.
Another big one, probably the biggest one that people will have, is the fireplaces. So you've got wet fireplaces. What's the quickest way to remedy that? I guess what's causing it as well, and what's the quickest way to remedy it for anyone who's looking to get started in property unsure?
I mean, a lot of times, if you've got like a fireplace, have a look to see whether it's been blocked up. If it's been blocked up and there's no vent in it, you need to get a vent in, and then go outside, have a look at your chimney, have a look at your chimney pot, and make sure you've got a cowl on top. If it's unused, make sure you've got a cowl that's going to vent it, so it won't allow rainwater to come down, but your air will flow through vent and then up. And that'll stop condensation forming on inside at flue, because if that flue gets wet and the soot gets wet, then like I was saying before, it's going to migrate to the surface, and then you're going to have sulfate issues. But the other thing as well is with fireplace, it needs a waterproofing system on, because on bottom, if it's been backfilled. So you make up of your fireplaces, you've got your hearth, which has not got, if it's an older property, you've not got a damp-proof membrane in there. So you've got your hearth, and then what they normally used to do is fill it with rubbish and bricks, and then all soot would fall of it years, and then that start filling up, and then you can get so the damp will rise up that way, and then it'll come laterally. So you need to isolate them salts. So what you need to do is put a waterproofing system on. Different waterproofing systems on market. So one simple one, which is an old method, is sand and cement with a waterproofer in, render. You render it, and then you put a polymer modified slurry on, and then skim over the top. Or I mean, some systems allow them to just paint it straight onto brickwork, but I'm always a bit sceptical people that paint it on brickwork, because there's a lot of holes in. Unless you've filled them holes, you're going to get air holes and stuff, even if you put 2 coats on, and it takes longer. So these quicker like systems that you can use. One of the systems that Safeguard's fetched out is a membrane called Dryflex. So how this works is, and this is good for if you've got damp issues on a chimney breast which is in an attic or upstairs in a bedroom, and you don't want to hack all plaster off. Well, this system, it's a membrane, and it's based on the tanking system or the waterproof system that tilers use. So when they do a wet room, they put like a membrane on, but it's fitted with a waterproof adhesive. So you put your waterproof adhesive on, and then you notch it with a notching trowel, and then you sit your membrane in, and then you iron it in so that it sticks to your membrane. And then you can skim straight up at top. So if you've got like a patch on top of a chimney breast, or if it goes onto ceiling, you cut your membrane to shape, you put your adhesive on, and then you sit it in and iron it in, and then you skim over it. And that creates a barrier. Because what we're trying to do is, we're trying to isolate these salts, and that system's an isolating system. And you can use it for waterproofing as well. But it is a brilliant system. Other way of doing it is you hack all plaster off, and then you put a plastic membrane on. So this is where we have come to this new system. I'd say it's not really new. It's about 6 or 7 years old. What Safeguard fetched out. So this is the most simple damp proofing system and cheapest you can get, and it's ideal for anybody that's wanting to have a go as a DIYer. Not so much for damp proofing, but if they've got any areas of loose plaster. So what you need is you need a product called Dry Shield. You have a product called Dry Grip and a plasterboard. So what you do is you get your plasterboard, bit that's fallen off. You'd hold it up. If you give a square like that, then you draw around it, and then you hack it off so that your plasterboard can sit in. You get your Dry Shield cream, and you paint it on. It's like a white cream, and then it goes see-through. You let that dry, and then you get your Dry Grip in the applicator, and you put small dots like that on it. Get your plasterboard, just ease it on. And sometimes you might have to hold it in place with a prop. Once that's in place, your plasterboard's held off at wall sort of a few millimetres, so there's not going to bridge, and you can just skim it. So you can foam up any gaps, slice it off, and then just skim over it. And it's the easiest method ever. And this is a method that I'm doing a digital product on. So our industry's got like an absolute terrible rap. It's like there's a lot of problems with misdiagnosis. Like I was on about before, you've got these companies going in and saying everything's rising damp. Well, because we've got a bad rap, one of the reasons why I'm sort of so visible on YouTube is so people can watch videos that I've done, me showing them how it should be done, so they've got some kind of idea.
I was going to say, those things you've just mentioned there, and that demonstration you just did, for anyone who's listening to this on the podcast or on YouTube, have you got visual showing how to do that on your website?
So if you
Damp Sam on YouTube.
Go onto YouTube, search for Damp Sam. I'll have done a video on it. So look for damp proofing, or just put keywords in and it'll come up. It'll come straight up. But this system is so easy. What we're trying to do is get more people in our industry, which is preservation industry. We've got a massive shortage, and I'm in PCA, Property Care Association, and we're trying to get more people to come and do the training there, so they know every different type of damp and how to fit these systems correctly. And how I started it as a plasterer, back in 1983, I went to college, learnt how to plaster, started off on a CITB scheme and lost my job at the end of that scheme. I was only there for a year, lost my job because of miners' strike. There was no work, so I had to keep going to college off my own back, paying for it myself, learning as I went along. It's so stressful. Sometimes, I just used to feel like crying, having to scrape a ceiling down that's Artex, unibond it and skim it. And this was back when, bags of plaster were 50 kg. So imagine like a bag of plaster now is 25 kg. One bag will double that.
Wow.
You can remember them, can't you?
I couldn't carry them. I can remember them. I just couldn't carry them.
Bags of Browning were like a coffin. They were long and big. Plasterboards 8x4s used to come in what's called a clip. So you had 2 plasterboards and they were bonded together with a piece of paper. So when you were loading an house out, you had to carry 2 plasterboards at a time. And I went as wide as what I am now. I was like a lap, believe it or not, and I had a long flowing hair and model looks, but that was just me. But so it was just so hard back in early days to try and make a living. But I kind of persevered. Got to a point where I wanted to get in. I went to college, did my plastering, I got advanced plastering, and then I started doing an HNC, a Higher National Certificate in Building Management, and I did my first year, and it was so hard. It was just so hard. I was learning stuff that I just didn't know nothing about. We were doing surveying. This is your background, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're a quantity surveyor.
I was a quality manager, but everything in construction, yes, quantity surveyor.
Well, you remember old method, which were with a chain. So when I were at Barnsley College, I just couldn't get my head around it. They'd send us out surveying, and they'd give us these chains, and I'm like, what's it? I couldn't because I've not been on site and seen it. It just wouldn't register in my head. But I did a couple of hacks. So lads that were in our class who were surveyors, I kind of got them to sort of pull me through. And with HNC, you have to get a unit at a time. So there's a unit here, unit there, unit there. And each unit is a class. So you might have an half unit, you might have a double, you might have 1 unit. And you've got to get 10 to pass. So I did mine over 4 years because I failed a few units, but I persevered, carried on doing it. But it came to a point where I was in between jobs, and there was a job in Sheffield, and it was student games, Commonwealth Games. They came to Sheffield, and them flats on Hill, they've been done out nice now. Well, that was going to be at Student Village, and they were renovating them. So I got a job as a finishing foreman for a plastering company, and they were from down south, 2 or 8 sharks. So I think they only took me on before Christmas to show that there were, that everything were okay. And I learnt a bit from it. And then after Christmas, we came back on day, and guy who was actual foreman gives me these pile of letters, and can you hand them out? And I'm like, looked at them, and they'd gone bust. So I'm having to hand these out to all plasterers, all these letters, and I'm like, oh no. I mean, they were all right with me, because they knew it weren't my fault, but they weren't happy, like big plasterers. And I'd only be 21. So that kind of went down thing, and I kind of at my lowest ebb. So I applied. I went to they call it Crosspool in Sheffield. Yeah. Is it a place where there's used to be where Market used to be? in bottom of Sheffield.
Not sure.
And there were an RAF recruiting office, and I'd just headed up to here, and I thought, I know what, I'll go and join RAF. So I went into RAF office, and I said, I want to join RAF, I want to be a photographer. I got my head that if I joined RAF and became a photographer, that can't be hard, can it? I was in a camera, and then I could end up just being a paparazzi or something once I've learned how to do it. And I went in, and you've got to take an exam. I didn't know you'd got to take exams. So goes in, sits down, took exam, and it was like when I first left school, we had to take an exam for CITB, and however many you got were judged in what you could do. So whatever percentage you got, like electrician what top, plumber, and then bricky joiner, plasterer, and
photographer was last, was it?
Painter what last. And then, but I wanted to be a brickie. I could have been a brickie or a plasterer. And that's a story in itself, because I'd gone to be a bricklayer, and they were supposed to be getting me a placement, and it was coming up to September, and my mum phoned Guy up who was head at CITB, and I tell you it was that councillor, Clive Betts, Sheffield councillor, and he was working for CITB, and my mum phoned him up, and she goes, "Where's his placement?" And they goes, "Oh, hang on a minute," could hear muffling up phone, and the next minute, we thought you all were going to get a placement, and he says, "Well, you all said that you're going to get a placement, top and bottom, no bricklaying placements, but we've got this plastering, one for a plasterer."
You're trying to get away from plastering.
Yeah, there's a position for a plasterer, or you can wait a year, and then they'll get you a place for bricks. I said, "I'm not waiting." I says, "What's a plasterer do?" You know, I didn't even know. So anyway, so I did that. But then, obviously, it was same thing with RAF. You sort of where you came on list were judged on what job you could do.
Yeah.
So obviously, pilot were out at window. I couldn't be a pilot. But I think photographer were up here. I think only thing I could do was like have their lowest job, because I took that exam, and I think you've got to know what you're doing. You must have to prepare for it. Like in life, you've got to prepare for things. So then, didn't get in that. Can't do that. And then other thing was I'd always fancied fire brigade, so they were recruiting for fire brigade. Fire brigade jobs were just like rocking horse
stuff.
Yeah, and you just couldn't get a fire brigade. Anyway, they were advertising, and it was at as you go, you'll know fire brigade, because it's some way down to workshop. It's that turn off. I think it's turn off to workshop, and you head towards Sheffield, I think it is, or Chesterfield, and it's there on your fire station's there on your right. And I'd applied, sort of phoned up, put my application form in, and they said, "Yeah, come for an interview." I thought, just forget that. I'm laughing, because I can do a bit of plastering, and then they have all this time off. So I pulls up at fire brigade place, and I was like, the queue were just snaking out at the door. It went round some houses and back round. Got to back at queue, went in, and that was like a verbal interview. So I waited, got my interview. No, got a letter through. Sorry. But as I'm queuing, I'm looking at this, because there's that massive tower, and I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking, I ain't really thought this through, because I'm scared of heights. So I'm like, I'm looking at this tower, and I'm thinking, I think you've got to like go up thing. And I have a mate called Almo, and he's a fireman. And test that he had to do, I don't know if you know that they have to do this test where they run up a ladder, and they have to go right to top rung, and then they have to take both hands off and stand there on top rung. And I said, no, I want to be able to do that.
No, I'm not.
So that were a no. Couldn't do that. I went my bottom, and then I just had this moment where I just thought, do you know what? All these doors have been shut in. I'm just going to have to be best at what I do. I'm just going to have to be best plasterer that there is. And from that moment on, I concentrated on, I mean, I was a decent plasterer, but I just thought I'm going to do everything that I can to be best plasterer ever. And once I got that thinking, I never looked back.
And that's the key, is focus on, too many people are jumping between jobs. It's focus on something and specialise in it. I never told you this, my dad was a plasterer.
I heard it on one of your other on your things. You used to help him, didn't you?
Yeah, he was a plasterer all his life, so that's all he ever did. Yeah,
and just to say, hardest job in the world. And
Hardest
honestly,
job in the world.
it's the hardest job in the world. Anybody that plasters, just take me out off to him. It's just so you're just under pressure all the time, because once you put your mix on it, and if you were ever like I was, a plasterer is forever pushing the sends until they get to sort of late on in life. So, like, if you're doing a full house, you'll mix up, and you might feel strong one day, and what you'll do is you'll put, like, say, that wall on. Then next day you'll get a bit more on, and you're just constantly under pressure because you put more on, and then you're going round and flattening off, and it might be warm, and that wall's going off, and this wall's going off, and sweat's throwing off you, and you just feel like I said, you just feel like sitting down and crying, because you're just under pressure all the time.
And it's the environment, the dust, everything. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I've been quite lucky, because I've always looked after myself. But I've a lad who I've plastered with Sid for years, the tourers. He's now, because he's just carried on plastering, whereas I've kind of done all other stuff. He's just dropping to bits. I went to see him the other day. He had to drop him some money off. If anybody's on there, have a look at that story that I've done about shares that I had, because it's a long story, but have a look at shares, but Sid's involved in that. But I had to drop him some money off, but he's got this condition called plantar summer, and basically what it is if you wear ill-fitting shoes for long periods and that, you arch on your shoulder. But it happens as you get older anyway. You arch, but you get this. Basically, when you put your foot down in your heel, it's like somebody's drilled an hole straight through your heel. You can't put weight on your heel. So he got that. So he came out of his house. And as he's got up on the morning and he's put his foot down, he's jarred his back then. So his back's gone. So when he came out of the house walking towards us, he just looked like he'd got tight knickers on. He was just walking funny. But I know I'm laughing, but a lot of plasterers get sort of injuries as they get older. And I've done a list on my podcast. I did a list of injuries that plasters get, sort of shoulders, elbows, a lot of itises, because it's repetitive use.
My dad, blood stopped circulating to the bottom part of his body.
Really?
Because he never wore masks and stuff. He also smoked when he was younger, but his circulation problems, and he started to get gout, and they actually had to amputate his foot below the knee.
Really?
And then it didn't heal because there was no blood flow.
Yeah.
So they had to amputate it above the knee. And I think it was because of the fumes and the stuff from years of plastering. It was in his system and started to stop the blood flow.
Well,
so you want to add that to your list. If
yeah. Well, so, I mean...
he was 79 when this happened, but it was still...
This is what I'm going to say. So when... back in the 80s and that, I started going to the gym, but I always played football, squash, swam. I always kept myself fit. Even though I was doing a full day's work, I'd go to gym at 4 o'clock. I mean, now, obviously, gyms, they're open earlier now, so I go at 6, but it's... I always kept myself fit, and I think there's a lot of plasterers that look after the sends now, because there's more accessibility to gyms and things like that. I mean, is it Mark Felix, world's strongest man? He were a plasterer. A lot of famous plasterers actually. Because when you're a plasterer, you notice these things. But just keep yourself fit. If you're a plasterer, keep yourself fit. And I know they might not want to go doing this, but as you get into your later life, you will be able to still work. But on that point, if you're a plasterer, this is what I've come on here for actually. But if you're a plasterer, learn this damp proofing system, because plasterers are probably earning around about £250 to £300 a day if they're lucky, if they're on a good job. If you learn this damp proofing system, you can charge £750 a day. So it's a massive jump. Because it's specialised and it's not hard to learn. So all you have to do is, you know, get in touch with me, get in touch with PCA, get in touch with Safeguard, any of these places that do system, learn how to do this system and, you know, invest in yourself.
And it's a win-win because you earn more money doing that, and the person you're doing it for, the investor, the homeowner, has got a better finish, better quality long-term product.
Definitely.
You're trying to get your message out there about damp proofing, about doing it in the right way. You've obviously mentioned your YouTube channel, Damp Sam. You're also setting up a podcast.
I've got a podcast called The Damp Show.
The Damp Show.
In conjunction, with lads at Progressive. And on this show, it's like a hybrid. So initially, my thoughts were I can set this show up. So I had to think about it, and I thought, well, it's hard to do a podcast just on my own. I'd listen saying, if you just do it on your own, people shut off after 20 minutes. But so you know, I could be going on for ages. But so it's kind of mixture. So I've got Dry Gav, who is the lay person. So I thought, well, if I'm going to do a show on damp, I want somebody who doesn't know out about it. They can bounce ideas off. So we wrote a format. So I'll do like sort of, I might do a 10-minute story on a type of damp, which is out from, you know, damp proofing rate to sort of beetles and all that kind of thing. 10 minutes on that. We have 10 minutes on Gav having a rant. We do, I do stories from when I was on site back in the 80s. So every now and again I'll throw a story in, a couple of jokes, and it makes it like a kind of show. But then also, and this were after listening to you, your podcast. I'd started it and I'm thinking, well, how do I do one on my own? Because Gav can only come on a Sundays. And I thought, well, and I've got a studio downstairs in my basement that I converted. So I thought, how can I do it on my own? So then I was listening to yours, and you were doing like your podcast. This is 7 things on this or 5 things on this, and I thought that's it. So I'll do like, you know, 7 types of damp, 5 injuries that you get. So we do all that kind of thing on like a short, and then also I do like a kind of interview format where it's obviously to try and get me 10,000 hours up and try and get better at interviewing to give people a better experience listening to me, rather than doing a lot of terms and all that kind of thing, is just to do as many interviews as you can. So, but my interviews has been mainly with my friends, because I think a lot of my people that I know have got really interesting stories, and all it is about the work. So from school to job that they're doing, and that journey and how they got there, and it's to let people know that they can, whatever path they choose when they're 16 at school or 18 when they're at university, they're going to end up doing something
completely different,
a lot different. With and you go up different. So you look at your career as a tree trunk, and you go off on branches.
Yeah.
And but some people don't. But their journey is interesting as well. There's some people that stayed in the same job, and it's interesting to ask them why.
So the Damp Show.
It's the Damp Show. Yeah.
So guys, we have got Simon Cooper, the YouTube channel. If you found this valuable today, if you want to know more about damp, if you're working on projects, if you want to know how to do it yourself, but ideally get an expert to do it for you, then on YouTube you've got Damp Sam. But on podcast, if you like listening to podcasts, if you like listening while you're driving in the car and stuff, because you shouldn't be on YouTube in the car, you should be on a podcast, then you've got the Damp Show. So Simon, really appreciate you coming in today. I think the audience are going to love that. I've got one final question for you before we shut up.
Go on.
You're a boxing fan.
Yeah.
Tyson Fury versus Wilder not Wilder. He's beat Wilder. Tyson Fury and Dylan White's coming up. Dylan White, Wilder, White. Dylan White's coming up. Who is going to win?
Right. So I'll make this quick. So this is an apology, right? This is an apology. So what happened was
who's going to win?
Fury's going to win. But
Fury's going to win. I'm on White. I want Fury. I've just put, for anyone on the podcast, one second, I've just put 20 quid on the table. He picked Fury. I wanted Fury because I'm half Irish. So's Fury. But I'm putting my 20 quid back in my wallet.
Let me just do this apology because, and I'll just tell you this thing with social media. So what I did was, I was sat waiting for my son coming out of boxing. My son goes boxing to Johnny Musgrave's gym. And I'll sit there for an hour waiting for him. And I seen this post on Facebook, and I looked at it, and it looked like from a sports page, and it said, Dylan White, Tyson Fury, cancelled. And then it said from Eddie Hearn, and there were a speech saying why it had been cancelled, and it was because it pulled out, blah, 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 blah. This. So I've been like sort of trying to do newsjacking like what Rob does. So jumping on things and just letting people know. So I gets my camera and I said, breaking news, Dylan White cancelled, so-and-so, so-and-so. I wonder why, all these things. Only a short, put it, while I'm sat there, put it up onto YouTube. Next thing, everybody's saying, oh, I bet all this. Next day, note it news. And it was fake news. It's the first time I've ever seen fake news.
Was it 1st of April?
No, it was day after. But, and I was like, I can't believe this. So then I had to do an apology. So I did a transcripted apology with actual picture, because I didn't mean to do it. Everybody's saying, oh, clickbait, and I says it weren't. I says it was. I just saw it. I genuinely put it out, but it got like 7,000 views.
Fake news gets more views.
Yeah, I did put it on a short, and it was the biggest one that I'd ever saw. But apologies, anybody that saw that post. I'm really sorry if it offended anybody.
No worries. So guys, you've got to follow, right? You've got to follow Simon Cooper, Damp Sam on YouTube, the Damp Show on the podcast, and learn about damp proofing, the systems around damp proofing. Whether you want to do it yourself, whether you're hiring a company to do it, you want to know. It's one of the big things you need to do in a property. So you want to make sure that you know that the person who's quoting you a job, that they're not a cowboy builder that's going to quote you a cheap price and do it wrong. So even if you're not going to do it yourself, you still need to know what should be done. So Simon, really appreciate you coming in and spending some time on the show. Guys, you've been listening to the Progressive Property Podcast. I've been Kevin McDonald. He's been Simon Cooper. You've been absolutely awesome, and I'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.